Hello and welcome to Insomniac Dose. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I inherited a hunting lodge from my Uncle Gerard in late October, 3 weeks after they found him at the bottom of a ravine 2 miles from the property. The sheriff called it accidental, a fall during a routine patrol of his land. My mother called it inevitable. Gerard was always walking those woods at strange hours, she said, as if that explained everything. I barely knew the man. He sent Christmas cards with no messages, just his signature. He never attended reunions. When I was 12, I asked my father why Uncle Gerard lived alone in the woods, and my father said, "Some people are built for solitude." The way he said it felt like a warning. The will was simple. The lodge was mine, along with 17 acres of mixed forest and wetland in the northern reaches of Wisconsin, provided I secured the property before the first heavy snow. The lawyer who handled the estate seemed relieved when I agreed to visit. "Good," he said, adjusting papers he'd already organized. "The property shouldn't sit empty. Not that one." The drive took 9 hours. Interstate gave way to state highways, then county roads that narrowed with each turn. The last 6 miles were gravel, flanked by white pine and paper birch so dense the afternoon sun came through in scattered coins. My phone lost signal somewhere near the town of Ember Lake, population 340 according to a weathered sign, and never found it again. The lodge appeared suddenly, as if the trees had been holding it back until the last possible moment. It was larger than I expected. 2 stories of dark timber and river stone, with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. A detached generator shed stood 20 yards to the east. Beyond that, the land sloped toward a marshy lake I could smell but not yet see. Wet earth and rotting vegetation, the scent of things breaking down. The lodge wasn't abandoned. That was my first surprise. The windows were intact, the roof solid, the porch swept clean of debris. But there was a tightness to it, a quality of clenched vigilance. Every window had heavy curtains drawn. The doors had deadbolts, chains, and a crossbar mount I associated with medieval castles. Along the thresholds, someone had laid lines of salt, meticulously maintained. I used the key the lawyer had provided and stepped inside. The air was stale but not musty, controlled, as if the lodge had been sealed rather than neglected. The interior was spare. Functional furniture, a wood stove, oil lamps alongside electric fixtures, and walls bare except for a few mounted deer heads that watched the room with glass indifference. On the kitchen table sat a black 3-ring binder, the kind students use for class notes. The label, printed on white adhesive paper in bold Arial font, read, "Staying Alive." Beneath the binder was a key ring, 5 keys, each tagged with neat labels. Generator, trail gate, cellar, rifle cabinet. The 5th tag was blank except for a single word written in permanent marker, "Don't." I opened the binder. The first page was a title sheet, the same words as the cover but larger, underlined 3 times. The second page began immediately, no preamble, no explanation. Rules for the lodge. Rule number 1. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, do not knock back. Rule number 2. After midnight, do not look out the windows for longer than 5 seconds. Rule number 3. Never whistle outside after dark. Rule number 4. If you see a deer standing completely still for more than 1 minute, do not watch it. Do not follow it. The list continued for 3 pages. 15 rules in total, each more specific and unsettling than the last. Some had margin notes in cramped handwriting I recognized from Gerard's Christmas cards. "This one is not negotiable. Test this at your own risk." I tried to leave. It didn't let me. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me. My first instinct was to laugh, some kind of joke, Gerard's last eccentric flourish. But the binder's edges were worn from handling. Pages had been removed and reinserted. Certain rules were highlighted in yellow, others underlined in red. This wasn't a gag. This was a document someone had lived by. I flipped back to the front page and noticed something I'd missed. A note taped to the inside cover, written in different ink, shakier letters. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Follow every rule, do not assume, do not test them. Do not tell yourself you're smarter than what's out here, you're not. Below that, one final line. The lodge doesn't keep you safe, the rules do. I looked up at the windows, the heavy curtains blocking the failing daylight. I looked at the salt lines, perfectly maintained. I looked at the door with its layers of locks, each one suggesting the one before it wasn't enough. The lodge was silent, but it was the kind of silence that felt occupied, the way a held breath is still something happening. I set the binder down carefully, as if it might react to rough handling, and began unpacking my bag. Outside, the trees swayed in a wind I couldn't hear through the thick walls. And somewhere far off, maybe across the marsh, maybe closer, something made a sound like knocking. I checked the binder. Rule number 1. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, do not knock back. I hadn't knocked. I told myself that mattered. I told myself I was fine. The sun set at 5:47 p.m. and the lodge exhaled into darkness. The generator kicked on at dusk, a steady mechanical hum that I found oddly comforting. It meant systems worked, that Gerard had maintained infrastructure, that this was still a place governed by predictable mechanisms. I made coffee on the propane stove, ate a protein bar, and tried to inventory what I'd inherited. The lodge interior was methodically organized. Cupboards held canned goods arranged by type and expiration date. A closet near the bathroom contained medical supplies sorted into labeled bins: trauma, infection, burn, shock. The bedroom upstairs, Gerard's I assumed, was monastic. A single bed, a nightstand, a lamp. No photographs, no personal effects except a pair of binoculars on the windowsill and a hunting rifle mounted above the door frame, unloaded with a trigger lock. It was the home of someone who had streamlined his life down to survival and observation. By 8 p.m. I'd settled into the main room with the binder, reading through the rules more carefully, trying to find a pattern or logic that would explain them. Rule number 5. If you smell flowers inside the lodge, open the windows immediately, even in winter. Rule number 7. Do not bring fresh meat onto the porch. Prepare all game in the shed. Rule number 11. If the fire goes out on its own, relight it within 10 minutes. They read like superstitions refined by repetition, the kind of things someone might develop if they lived alone long enough, assigning meaning to coincidence until coincidence became doctrine. I told myself that's what this was. Isolation does strange things to judgment. Then I heard the knocking. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, coming from the wall behind the couch. Not the door, not the window. The wall itself, interior, as if someone were standing inside the space between the studs. I froze, coffee mug halfway to my mouth. Silence. 5 seconds, 10. 3 more knocks, same rhythm, same location, precise, patient, like someone waiting for an answer. I set the mug down carefully and opened the binder to the first rule, even though I'd already memorized it. Rule number 1. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, do not knock back. The knocking repeated. 3 beats, spaced exactly the same as before. My rational mind offered explanations: pipes expanding, an animal in the crawl space, the wood settling as the temperature dropped. But the sound was too intentional, too measured. I stared at the wall. The mounted deer head above the couch stared back, its glass eyes reflecting lamplight. Without thinking, a nervous reflex, I tapped my knuckle against the wooden arm of the chair 3 times. The same rhythm. The lodge went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The generator's hum vanished. The creak of wind against the eaves stopped. Even the faint whistle of air through the stovepipe cut off, as if the building were holding its breath. I couldn't hear my own heartbeat. I couldn't hear myself breathe. For 5 seconds, the world went utterly absent of sound, and I felt a pressure in my chest like being underwater. Then, a single long drag against the exterior siding, directly behind where I sat. Not scratching. Dragging, as if something heavy and deliberate had pressed against the wall and pulled downward, testing. The sound lasted 3 seconds and stopped. The generator hummed back to life. Wind returned. The stove ticked. I stood up slowly, the binder clutched in both hands, and walked to the front door. I checked the locks, all engaged. I checked the salt line, unbroken. I did not open the door. I did not look out the window. Instead, I went outside, through the back door, moving quickly, a flashlight in one hand. I circled to the spot where I'd heard the dragging sound, shining the beam along the siding. There were marks. 4 parallel grooves, each about an inch apart, running vertically down the wood for roughly 2 feet. They were shallow, fresh splinters, still pale where the stain had been scraped away. Too wide for claws. Too even. The spacing was wrong for any animal I knew. I stepped back, the flashlight shaking in my hand. When I returned inside and locked the door behind me, I saw that someone, Gerard presumably, had left a note in the margin of rule number 1, written in blue ink with a date from 4 years ago. It learns faster when you answer. I sat at the kitchen table until midnight, the binder open in front of me, and did not tap, knock, or make rhythmic sounds of any kind. The lodge settled around me, full of small noises that might have been ordinary and might not. At 12:47 a.m. I heard 3 knocks again, this time from the ceiling above the kitchen. I did not respond. The knocking stopped. I turned the page in the binder and started reading rule number 2, my hands still trembling, knowing now that the rules weren't paranoia, they were documentation. My cousin Ethan arrived 2 days later in a Jeep loaded with tools, optimism, and a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock. I heard him before I saw him, Springsteen echoing through the trees as he navigated the gravel track. When he pulled up to the lodge, he climbed out grinning, surveying the property like a man appraising a fixer-upper with good bones. "This is incredible," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Do you know what you could do with this place? Airbnb gold, man. Hunters would pay a fortune for this kind of seclusion." Ethan worked in property management downstate and had opinions about everything involving real estate. When I told him I'd inherited the lodge, he'd insisted on driving up to assess the situation and help me see the potential. I'd tried to discourage him, but Ethan didn't discourage easily. "You're overthinking it," he said, hauling a duffel bag onto the porch. "It's a cabin. You winterize it, make sure the wells and septic work, slap on some marketing copy about authentic wilderness experience, and you're printing money." I didn't mention the binder immediately. Ethan had a way of turning serious concerns into punchlines, and I wasn't ready to be laughed at. Not after 2 nights of listening to the lodge breathe, knock, and settle in ways that felt responsive. He spent the first day exploring with unsettling enthusiasm, walking the trails with his phone held high, trying to find a signal. He checked the generator shed, inspected the foundation, and poked around the cellar, a stone-walled space beneath the kitchen that smelled of earth and cold metal. "Everything's solid," he reported. Gerard knew what he was doing. "You've got good infrastructure here. This place could run off-grid indefinitely." That evening, over a dinner of canned stew and bread, Ethan found the binder. I'd left it on the side table, and he flipped it open with the casual curiosity of someone expecting receipts or maintenance logs. He read the first page, then the second. Then he started laughing. "Oh man, was Gerard one of those doomsday guys? This is like a prepper checklist written by someone who watched too much late-night TV. He turned to rule number 8. If you find dead birds on the porch, burn them immediately. Do not touch them with your bare hands. And snorted. What, is there some rare bird flu out here? I don't think it's a joke, I said quietly. Ethan looked at me, still smiling. Come on, you're not seriously buying this, are you? It's cabin fever nonsense. Guy lived alone too long and started making up problems. I didn't argue. I'd learned that skepticism required proof, and I had nothing but gouges on wood and sounds in walls. The next afternoon, Ethan decided to check the Southern Trail, the one that skirted the marsh and looped back through a section of Forrest Gerard's maps marked with red circles. I told him to stay within sight of the lodge. He waved me off. He returned just before dusk, breathless and holding his phone like evidence. You have to see this, he said, pulling up a video. There's a deer out there acting completely insane. The footage showed a doe standing in a small clearing about 60 yards from the lodge. It was facing the camera, utterly motionless, no ear flick, no tail swish, no shift of weight. Ethan's voice on the recording was amused at first. Look at this thing, frozen solid. Must have heard me coming. The timestamp showed he'd filmed for 40 seconds, then a minute, then 90 seconds. The deer didn't move. Is it sick? Ethan muttered on the video, stepping closer. At the 2-minute mark, the deer's head began to turn. Slowly, smoothly, it rotated to follow Ethan's movement. But it turned too far. The neck, articulating at an angle that would have broken bone. The head swiveled nearly backward, eyes still locked on the camera. Ethan's laughter cut off. The deer took one step forward. Its front leg moved wrong, the joints bending in a way that suggested the bones inside weren't quite aligned, as if something were trying to operate the limb from memory rather than instinct. The video ended abruptly. What the hell was that? Ethan asked, his voice missing its earlier confidence. I took the phone and watched the clip again, my stomach tightening. When the deer stepped, its hoof left an impression in the soft ground, but the shape was wrong, too elongated. The dew claws were positioned like fingers trying to grip. Did you follow it? I asked. No. It started walking sideways into the brush, and He shook his head. I got this feeling like I wasn't supposed to be there. I opened the binder to rule number 4 and showed it to him. If you see a deer standing completely still for more than 1 minute, do not watch it. Do not follow it. Ethan read the rule twice. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The video had shaken something loose in him, some primal recognition that his explanations weren't adequate. That night, he went outside to smoke on the porch, something he did habitually, a ritual of stress relief. He was gone for less than 3 minutes. When he came back inside, he was pale. Did you hear that? He asked. Hear what? I was standing out there and I heard someone behind me, breathing. Not like wind, like a person. He sat down heavily. And it matched me. When I inhaled, it inhaled. When I held my breath, it stopped. Exactly the same timing. I watched his hands shake as he lit another cigarette indoors, something I would have called him out for in any other circumstance. Maybe it's an echo, he said weakly, sound bouncing off the trees. But he didn't go outside again after dark. And when I checked on him before bed, he was reading the binder, cover to cover. His earlier skepticism replaced by something quieter and far more afraid. By the 3rd day, the lodge felt smaller, as if the walls had shifted inward overnight. Ethan stopped making jokes. We moved carefully, speaking in low voices, listening to the building settle with an attention that bordered on paranoia. I found myself counting my steps between rooms, checking to see if distances remained consistent. I needed answers, or at least context. If Gerard had maintained this place as though it were a containment facility, there had to be records, something that explained what we were containing. I started searching. The upstairs bedroom had a closet I'd initially dismissed as storage. Inside, beneath folded tarps and a stack of blankets, I found a cardboard file box sealed with packing tape. The label read, Observational Logs 1998-2024. I brought it downstairs. Ethan watched as I cut the tape and opened it. Inside were notebooks, maps, cassette tapes, and a bundle of photographs held together with a rubber band that disintegrated when I touched it. The notebooks were filled with Gerard's handwriting, meticulous entries organized by date and time, each describing conditions, occurrences, and responses. October 14th, 2003, 11:40 p.m. Knocking on north wall, interior, did not respond, ceased after 8 minutes. January 8th, 2006, 2:15 a.m. Heard a voice outside calling my name, recognized cadence as my brother's voice. Brother died in 1987, did not answer. Voice repeated for 12 minutes, then stopped mid-word. March 22nd, 2011, 9:00 p.m. Deer standing motionless near trail marker number 4. Observed for 40 seconds before looking away. Deer gone when I checked again. Found tracks leading into the marsh. Tracks changed halfway, became something else. Page after page, year after year. Gerard had documented everything with the detached precision of a field researcher, noting patterns, testing hypotheses, refining his understanding into the rules that now govern my existence here. One entry stood out, dated July 2019. It doesn't hunt, it replaces, it finds the small certainties you carry, your routines, your reflexes, your voice, and it tries them on. The rules aren't protection, they're refusals. Every time you follow them, you deny it another piece of yourself. I set the notebook down, my hands unsteady. The maps were next. Gerard had charted the property in obsessive detail, marking trails with colored ink. Red circles surrounded specific trees. Sections of forest were labeled No Eye Contact Zone, Active Threshold, Unstable Boundary. One map had a note scrawled across the bottom. The land is older than the lodge. We built on something that was already occupied. Ethan leaned over my shoulder, staring at the maps. What the hell does unstable boundary mean? Before I could answer, I noticed the cassette tapes. 6 of them, each labeled with a date and a name. Some names I didn't recognize. One I did. Gerard Tollin, Final. Entry October 2024. I found an old tape player in the closet, batteries corroded but functional after I replaced them. I loaded Gerard's final tape and pressed play. Static, then his voice. Tired, hoarse, but calm. If you're listening to this, you've inherited the lodge, and I'm sorry. I tried to sell it, I tried to burn it down twice. The first time, the fire wouldn't catch. The second time, it burned for 6 hours and the structure was untouched. That's when I understood. The lodge isn't the problem, the lodge is the compromise. A pause. I heard him take a breath. The thing out here, I don't know what it is. I've tried to name it. I've tried to understand it. I've been here 40 years, and all I know is that it wants what we have. Shape, voice, intention. It's been trying to wear us down since before I was born. The rules are how we keep it outside. Another pause, longer. But I'm tired, and I think I'm running out of refusals. The tape ended. I looked at Ethan, his face. It had gone slack. When did Gerard die? He asked quietly. 3 weeks ago, they found him in a ravine. Did they find him, or did they find something that looked like him? I didn't answer because I didn't know. That night, I added a new rule to the mental list I'd been compiling, one that Gerard hadn't written down but had implied in every log entry. Never assume you've seen the worst of it. I was about to close the binder and try to sleep when I noticed something wrong. I'd been sitting in the kitchen facing the hallway that led to the main room. The hallway was 10 feet long. I'd measured it mentally a dozen times, but now, looking at it in the dim light of the oil lamp, it seemed longer. 15 feet, maybe more. The door at the end, the one leading to the main room, was farther away than it should have been. I stood slowly, my heart accelerating. I walked toward the door, counting my steps. 8 steps. It should have been 4. When I reached the threshold and looked back, the kitchen was exactly where it should be. I flipped through the binder, fingers clumsy, until I found a rule I'd skimmed over before, one I'd thought was metaphorical. Rule number 6. If the lodge looks unfamiliar, it is not the lodge. Sit down, close your eyes, count to 100. I sat down on the floor immediately, back against the wall, and closed my eyes. I counted. At 60, I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, moving from the bedroom toward the stairs. At 80, I heard my own voice from the kitchen, humming a song I'd been humming earlier. At 95, the footsteps stopped at the top of the staircase. At 100, I opened my eyes. The hallway was 10 feet long again. The kitchen was silent. Upstairs, nothing moved. Ethan appeared in the doorway, pale and shaking. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Don't tell me what you heard," I said quickly. "Just tell me, did you follow the rules?" He nodded. "Then we're fine," I lied. But I kept the binder open on my lap for the rest of the night, and I did not let myself fall asleep. He arrived just after dawn, stepping out of the tree line like he'd walked there from somewhere without roads. I saw him through the kitchen window. A man in his 60s, lean and weathered, wearing a canvas jacket and boots caked in mud. He stood at the edge of the clearing 30 yards from the porch and waited. He didn't wave, didn't approach. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, as if giving us time to notice him on our own terms. Ethan saw him too. "Who the hell is that?" I didn't know. But something about the way the man stood, patient, careful, observing the lodge before approaching it, told me he wasn't a stranger. Not to this place. I stepped onto the porch. The man tilted his head slightly, a gesture that felt like acknowledgement, and began walking toward me. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps 10 feet away and looked at me with eyes that were sharp and tired in equal measure. "You're Tolland's nephew," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "And you are?" "Name's Merrick. I'm the conservation officer for this district. Also the caretaker for this property was, anyway, while Gerard was alive. Guess I'm here to see if you're planning to keep it or run." He said it bluntly, without judgment, as though both options were equally valid. "I'm still deciding," I said. Merrick nodded slowly, his gaze drifting past me to scan the lodge exterior, the windows, the salt line along the threshold. "You kept the salt fresh. That's good. Shows you're reading." "Reading what?" "The binder. Gerard's rules." Merrick's attention snapped back to me. "Did you whistle outside yet?" "No." "Did you answer your name when you heard it called?" I hesitated. "No." "Did you bleed anywhere on the porch?" "What?" "No. Why?" "Good, don't." He shifted his weight, still not stepping closer. "Mind if I come in?" "I won't without being asked twice. It's one of the old courtesies." I didn't understand, but I recognized a ritual when I saw one. "You can come in." Merrick waited. "Please, come in," I said, more formally this time. He climbed the steps and crossed the threshold carefully, pausing to glance at the salt line as if confirming it met standards. Inside, he scanned the room with the attention of someone conducting an inspection, not for cleanliness, but for wrongness. Ethan stood near the couch, arms crossed defensively. "You work for the county?" "In a manner of speaking." Merrick pulled a chair from the kitchen table and sat without being offered. "I've been managing this land for 20 years. Checking fences, monitoring trails, making sure no one camps where they shouldn't." Gerard hired you? I asked. Gerard and I had an arrangement. He kept the lodge secure and I kept people away from the perimeter. This isn't Parkland, despite what the maps say. It's private and it needs to stay that way. Ethan frowned. Why? What's out there? Merrick looked at him for a long moment, then at me. You've been here 3 days, you've heard things, seen things. Gerard left you the binder because he knew you'd need it. So I'll ask you plainly, do you believe the rules or do you think your uncle was crazy? I thought of the knocking, the grooves on the siding, the deer with its backward head and wrong footprints, the hallway that stretched. I believe them, I said. Merrick exhaled slowly, something like relief crossing his face. Then we can speak plainly. This land is old. Older than the county records, older than the treaties. People used to avoid this area, indigenous groups, early settlers, trappers. They had their own rules, their own words for it. We just call it the boundary now. Boundary to what? Ethan asked. To something that doesn't have a name we'd understand. It's not an animal. It's not a spirit, not in the way you're thinking. It's something that exists where our certainty ends. It's drawn to us, to the things we believe are fixed, our faces, our voices, our sense of space and time, and it tries to wear them. I thought of Gerard's tape. It wants what we have: shape, voice, intention. Merrick continued. The lodge was built here by Gerard's grandfather, a man who understood what he was doing. It's not protection, it's a boundary marker. The rules are how you maintain that boundary. You follow them and the thing stays mostly outside. You break them and it starts negotiating. What happens if we leave? I asked. Merrick's expression darkened. You can try. Some do, but the land has a way of looping back. You'll find the lodge again even if you drive for hours in the opposite direction. The inheritance isn't the property. It's the responsibility. Gerard tried to leave a dozen times. He always came back. Ethan's voice was strained. So we're trapped. You're bound, Merrick corrected. There's a difference. Gerard managed for 40 years. You could too if you're careful. Or you could hand it off, find someone willing to take the inheritance, someone who'll respect the rules, but you can't abandon it. The boundary needs a keeper. He stood, preparing to leave, and paused at the door. One more thing. Never tell anyone you're alone out here. Not on a phone call. Not in a journal. Don't even think it too loudly if you can help it. Why? I asked. Merrick met my eyes. Because it loves that sentence. It listens for isolation, and when it knows you're alone, it starts trying on your voice. He left without another word, walking back into the trees with the easy gait of someone who'd navigated these woods 1,000 times and knew exactly where not to step. I stood on the porch and watched him disappear, my breath fogging in the cold morning air. Behind me, Ethan said quietly, "We need to leave, now." But when I turned to face him, I saw he was staring at the tree line, where something tall and thin stood just beyond the first row of pines, motionless, watching the lodge with an attention that felt ancient and patient. It didn't move. It didn't need to. It was waiting. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I woke to the sound slicing through the silence, a mechanical trill from the kitchen, harsh and insistent. I hadn't known the lodge had a working landline. The lawyer hadn't mentioned it. Gerard's notes hadn't referenced it. But the phone was ringing, and in the dead clarity of deep night, that ringing felt like an alarm. Ethan was already awake, sitting upright on the couch where he'd chosen to sleep, blanket bunched around his waist. "Is that a phone?" I climbed out of the sleeping bag I'd laid out on the floor. Neither of us wanted to sleep in Gerard's bed upstairs, and moved toward the kitchen. The phone was an old rotary model mounted on the wall near the pantry, the kind with a coiled cord and a receiver heavy enough to kill a man. It hadn't rung once in 3 days. Now it rang again, and again. I lifted the receiver slowly as if it might bite. Hello? Static. Thick. Crackling. The hiss of a bad connection or something worse. Then beneath the static, breathing. Ragged, wet, desperate, a voice broke through, shaking and familiar. Sweetheart, please, please, it's so cold. My mother's voice. My breath stopped. My mother was in Michigan, 8 hours south, in a climate-controlled condo with neighbors and streetlights. She was asleep. She had to be asleep. Mom? I'm outside. I got turned around and I can't find the road. I saw the lights from the lodge. Please, baby, open the door. I'm freezing. The words were right. The cadence was right. I knew that voice. The slight hitch when she was scared, the way she called me sweetheart and baby in the same breath when she was in distress. Ethan was standing now, crossing the room. What's wrong? Who is it? I held up a hand to silence him, my mind racing. My mother didn't know the exact location of the lodge. She didn't even know I was still here. I told her I was coming up for a day or two to assess the property, and cell service was non-existent. But the voice continued pleading. It's so dark out here. I can see the porch light. Just open the door, please. I don't understand why you won't open the door. My hand moved toward the door. Every human instinct in me screamed to respond, to help, to open the goddamn door because my mother was outside in the cold and I was her son and she was afraid. Ethan grabbed my arm. Wait, stop. It's my mom, I said, my voice cracking. No, it's not. He was staring at me, eyes wide with a fear that looked like clarity. Think. How would she even get here? The voice outside shifted, growing more urgent. I called you yesterday. You told me where you were. Don't you remember? You said you were alone at the lodge and I got worried, so I drove up to check on you. But I got lost and now I can't find... The phone line clicked off. The voice continued anyway, muffled now, coming from outside the front door. Please, please, I'm so cold. Why won't you answer? Me? Don't you love me? I dropped the receiver. It swung on its cord, pendulum-like, tapping the wall. Ethan was already moving toward the binder, flipping through pages with shaking hands. He found the rule and shoved the binder toward me, his finger jabbing the text. Rule number 9. If someone you love begs you to open the door after dark, do not speak, do not cry, do not pray. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. The rule didn't say ignore it. It said do not speak, do not cry, do not pray. That meant I couldn't respond, couldn't explain, couldn't even grieve the thing wearing my mother's voice. The voice outside was louder now, more insistent, and it was saying things only my mother would know, details from my childhood, private family memories, the name of my first dog, the song she used to sing when I couldn't sleep. You had a nightmare once about a man standing in your doorway. You were 6. I sat with you until sunrise. Remember, I told you nothing could hurt you as long as I was there. Tears burned my eyes. I clenched my jaw to keep from making a sound. The voice changed. The pleading edge dropped away, replaced by something flat and distant, as though the emotion had been a mask and now the mask was slipping. You're being very rude, it said calmly. I came all this way. Ethan and I stood frozen in the center of the room, barely breathing. Something pressed against the door. Not a knock, not a scratch. A slow, even pressure as though a body were leaning against the wood, testing its give. The door was solid oak, reinforced with 3 locks engaged. But the pressure continued, and I heard a faint creak, not from the hinges, but from the frame itself, as if the force being applied wasn't quite distributed the way a human body would distribute weight. The voice tried again, switching tactics. I'm hurt. I fell and I think my leg is broken. I need you to help me, please, please, I'm bleeding. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. The pressure on the door stopped. Silence. Then barely audible, a whisper from directly outside, so close it could have been spoken through the keyhole. You're doing so well. The words were casual, almost proud, the tone of someone coaching a child through a difficult task. The thing outside, whatever it was, had stopped pretending. Ethan's breathing was shallow, rapid. I reached out and squeezed his shoulder, as much to steady myself as him. We stood there in the dim light of the oil lamp, listening to the silence, waiting for the next move. It didn't come. Minutes passed. 5, 10. The lodge settled. The wind picked up outside and the trees creaked, normal sounds bleeding back into the night. At 3 a.m. I checked the window, 5 seconds, no more, and saw nothing on the porch. No figure, no footprints in the frost that had begun to settle on the wooden planks. But when I went to lock the door again just to be sure, I found it already locked. All 3 deadbolts engaged, the chain in place, the crossbar mounted. I hadn't unlocked it. I'd stopped myself. But for a moment I couldn't remember stopping. I could only remember the feeling of wanting to. The pull so strong it felt like instinct, like love. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the binder, my hands shaking. Ethan sat across from me, his face gray. "That wasn't your mom." "I know. But it sounded like her." "I know." We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We sat in the kitchen, the binder between us, and listened to the lodge breathe. At dawn, I called my mother's number on my cell phone. The signal was weak but present for a brief window. She answered on the 3rd ring, groggy and confused. "Sweetheart, it's 6 in the morning. Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, my voice unsteady. "I just wanted to hear your voice." "Are you sure you're all right? You sound strange." "I'm fine. I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby. Call me later, okay?" I ended the call and set the phone down. Ethan was watching me. "She's fine." "Yeah." "So what the hell was outside last night?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. I only knew that something had listened to me, really listened, and learned how to sound like the person I'd trust most in the world. And it had almost worked. Ethan lasted 2 more days before he broke. I don't blame him. The lodge had a way of grinding you down, not through violence but through the slow accumulation of wrongness. Doors that required 4 steps to reach on Monday needed 6 on Wednesday. Shadows fell at angles that didn't match the light source. Twice I heard my own voice from another room, humming songs I'd been thinking about but hadn't vocalized. The rules kept us alive, but they couldn't keep us sane. On the 5th night, the generator sputtered. The lights dimmed, flickered, and went out. The hum that had become the lodge's baseline heartbeat vanished, leaving only silence and the ticking of the wood stove. I grabbed a flashlight and checked. The binder. Rule number 12. If the generator dies after midnight, do not go outside to fix it. The lodge will provide enough light. It was 12:40 a.m. Ethan stood near the window, staring at the darkened generator shed barely visible in the moonlight. "We need power. The temperature's dropping. Without the generator, the pipes could freeze." "The rule says the lodge will provide light," I said, trying to sound certain. "What does that even mean? A metaphor? A fucking riddle?" Ethan's voice was strained, fraying. "We can't just sit here in the dark and hope the plumbing doesn't burst." As if in answer, the oil lamps on the table flared brighter, their wicks burning with a steady, warm glow I hadn't adjusted. It was enough light to see by, enough to read, enough to survive until morning. "There," I said, "we're fine." But Ethan wasn't fine. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep. 5 days in the lodge had stripped away his confidence, leaving only raw nerves and the desperate need to do something, anything that felt like control. "I'm just going to check it," he said, pulling on his jacket. "It's probably something simple. A loose connection, a tripped breaker. 5 minutes and I'll have it running." "Ethan, don't." "I'll be careful. I'll stay in the light. I won't look at anything weird. I'll follow the path straight there and back." He was already moving toward the door, flashlight in hand. "Ethan, the rule is specific. After midnight, you don't go outside for the generator. That's not negotiable." "Your uncle was paranoid," Ethan snapped, his voice brittle. "I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here listening to the walls and pretending that following some insane list is the difference between life and death." He unlocked the door before I could stop him. Cold air rushed in, and with it the scent of wet earth and pine. Ethan stepped onto the porch, swept his flashlight across the clearing, and descended the steps. I stood in the doorway, heart hammering, watching as he walked toward the generator shed. His beam of light cut through the darkness, steady and practical, illuminating the gravel path. Then I remembered another rule. Rule number 2. After midnight, do not look out the windows for longer than 5 seconds. I'd already been watching for 10, 15. I forced myself to look away, stepping back inside, but my eyes found the window again, pulled by the same awful magnetism that had nearly made me open the door 2 nights before. Ethan reached the shed. He opened the metal door, the hinges squealing, and disappeared inside. His flashlight beam moved across the interior walls, methodically searching for the problem. 20 seconds. 30. The light stopped moving. I stared through the window, unable to look away now, my breath fogging the glass. Ethan stepped out of the shed slowly, too slowly, his movements mechanical. His flashlight was pointed at the ground, illuminating his feet. He turned toward the lodge, but he didn't walk back. He stood there, motionless, facing me. And then I saw it. Behind him, just beyond the edge of the flashlight's beam, something tall and thin stood between the trees. It wasn't moving. It didn't need to. It was simply there, a vertical shadow with no source, too narrow to be human but too deliberate to be a tree. Ethan's flashlight flickered, went out. In the darkness, I heard his voice, calm and steady, drifting across the clearing. "I'm okay. Come help." It was his voice, his cadence, his inflection. But Ethan hadn't turned toward me. I could see his silhouette in the moonlight, and his head was still angled down, facing the ground, while his voice projected toward the lodge. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly that I fumbled the chain twice before securing it. I pressed my back against the door and forced myself to breathe. Outside, the voice continued, patient and friendly. "Hey, I got it working, but I need you to..." "Working?" Flip the breaker from inside the shed. "Can you come out here real quick?" It was so reasonable, so casual, so perfectly Ethan. I closed my eyes and counted to 100. When I opened them, the lodge was silent. The oil lamps burned steadily. I checked the window, 3 seconds, no more, and saw nothing in the clearing. No figure by the shed, no Ethan. The generator kicked back on at 6:47 a.m., humming to life as if it had never stopped. I went outside in full daylight, every nerve screaming at me to stay inside. The shed was empty. The breaker panel was closed. Everything was in order. Ethan's flashlight sat on the gravel path between the lodge and the shed, clean and dry, batteries still functional. There were no footprints, no drag marks, no sign of disturbance. On the porch, arranged neatly on the top step, were Ethan's car keys, his wallet, and his phone, each item placed with care like someone returning borrowed tools. I searched the woods. I called his name until my voice gave out. I walked every trail marked on Gerard's maps, staying within the boundaries, following the rules. I never found him. That night, alone in the lodge, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the binder. I flipped to the last page and found a note I'd missed before, written in Gerard's hand. "The ones who break the rules don't die. They stay. Somewhere. And it wears them when it needs to." At 11:52 p.m., I heard knocking from inside the walls. 3 slow beats, patient and familiar. I did not knock back. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just sat there, alone in the lodge, knowing I was no longer alone and that Ethan was still here in some way that was worse than death. The generator hummed, the lodge settled, and I turned the page to the next rule because that was all I had left. The lodge began changing on the 7th night. Not all at once, not with drama, just small, creeping alterations that accumulated like frost on glass. Invisible at first, then undeniable. I woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. The hallway from the bedroom to the bathroom was 12 feet. I'd measured it obsessively, counting steps, checking distances, anchoring myself to certainty. 12 feet. 4 steps. It took me 9 steps that night. I stood in the bathroom doorway, staring back at the bedroom, my pulse loud in my ears. The space had stretched. The walls were the same. The floorboards were the same. But the distance was wrong, as if the lodge were breathing outward, expanding into dimensions I couldn't see but could feel in the wrongness of my stride. I went downstairs. The kitchen was where it should be. But the windows were in different positions. One near the sink had shifted 2 feet to the left, and the view through it showed trees I didn't recognize, angled at perspectives that shouldn't be visible from that side of the lodge. I checked the binder. Rule number 6. If the lodge looks unfamiliar, it is not the lodge. Sit down, close your eyes, count to 100. I sat at the count 2 kitchen table, closed my eyes, counted. At 40, I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate. The weight distribution was wrong. Too much pressure on the heel, as if whoever walked wasn't used to human balance. At 60, I heard a door open, the bedroom door, the one I'd left closed. At 80, the footsteps descended the stairs, one at a time, each creak perfectly spaced. I kept counting. At 90, the footsteps stopped at the bottom of the staircase, just outside the kitchen. At 95, I heard my own voice, humming softly. The melody was from a song I'd been thinking about earlier, one I hadn't sung aloud. At 100, I opened my eyes. The kitchen was correct again. The window was in its proper place. The hallway looked normal, but the air smelled wrong. Not bad, just different, like wet leaves and cold stone, the scent of something ancient and patient. I checked the locks on the doors, all secure. I checked the salt lines, unbroken. I checked the windows. 5 seconds, no more, and saw nothing in the darkness beyond. But when I turned back to the table, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The binder was open to a page I hadn't touched. Rule number 15 near the end of the list is highlighted in yellow and underlined 3 times in red ink. Rule number 15. If you hear yourself speaking from another room, do not answer. If you answer, you will switch places. Below it, in Gerard's handwriting, this is the mechanism. This is how it takes you. I heard a sound from the main room, the soft clink of ceramic on wood. Someone was making coffee. I moved slowly to the doorway and looked. The main room was dark except for the glow of the wood stove. At the small table near the window, a figure sat with its back to me, pouring coffee from the French press into a mug. The motion was smooth, practiced, ordinary. The figure was wearing my jacket, my boots. It had my posture, the slight slouch, the way I leaned forward when I concentrated. It hummed the same melody I'd heard earlier. Then it spoke, casual and calm, my voice exactly. Did you check the generator log? I think Gerard missed an entry. It was talking to me, inviting response, offering normalcy. Every instinct screamed at me to answer, to confirm, to engage with the familiar shape and voice that looked and sounded like it belonged. I clenched my jaw. I did not speak. The figure stopped humming. Its shoulders tensed slightly as if listening. I'm going to make eggs, it said, my voice carrying a tone of friendly announcement. You want some? I took a step back into the kitchen, moving quietly. The figure stood, still facing away, and walked toward the stove. Its gait was almost right, just a half-second delay in the knee bend. a slight hitch in the weight transfer, as if it were piloting the body from memory rather than instinct. It opened the propane valve, struck a match, the burner caught with a soft whoosh. "I've been thinking," it said, cracking an egg one-handed into a pan. "We should just burn the binder. All this stress over rules nobody can explain. What's the point?" It was testing me, probing for reaction. I stayed silent, my back pressed against the kitchen wall, my breath shallow and controlled. The figure turned, and I saw its face. My face, not a mask, not an approximation, my exact face, down to the scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the uneven stubble, the exhaustion in the eyes. It looked at me, at the real me, and smiled. "You're doing so good," it said softly, the same phrase I'd heard outside the door days ago, the same tone of awful encouragement. Then it walked toward me, not quickly, not aggressively. Just a calm, purposeful approach, one step at a time, holding eye contact. I remembered the rule: do not answer. I didn't, but I also didn't know what to do. The rule told me what not to do, but not how to survive the thing that was already inside, already wearing me, already speaking. The figure stopped 3 feet away, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. Curiosity, maybe, or patience. "You can't keep this up forever," it said. "You'll slip. You'll forget a rule. You'll get tired." It tilted its head, my head, at an angle I'd never use. "And when you do, I'll be right here." The lights flickered, the wood stove guttered. The figure smiled wider, and I saw that its teeth were just slightly too even, too white, like they'd been arranged by someone who'd seen teeth but never felt them. Then the generator kicked off. The lodge plunged into darkness. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I stood frozen in the absolute black, listening. Footsteps, close now, circling. A voice, my voice whispering from inches away. "I know you're scared. I would be too." I closed my eyes even though it made no difference in the dark, and I counted. 1, 2, 3. At 30, the generator rumbled back to life. The lights returned. The kitchen was empty. I was alone. But when I looked at the table, I saw 2 coffee mugs, both half full, both still warm. I checked every room, every closet, every window. I found nothing. But I knew, with the certainty that comes from living inside fear for 7 days straight, that I was not alone in the lodge anymore. Something had made it inside, and it was learning. Morning came at 7:14 a.m., the sun breaking through the tree line in cold, clean light. I watched it rise from the kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I didn't remember making. The lodge was silent. The generator hummed its steady rhythm. Everything looked normal. I didn't trust it. I packed my duffel bag methodically. Clothes, documents, the few personal items I'd brought. I left Gerard's belongings untouched. The binder stayed on the table. I wasn't taking it with me. I wasn't staying. I walked out to Ethan's Jeep. He'd left the keys, after all, and loaded my bag into the passenger seat. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and frost. Birds called from the trees. Normal sounds, daylight sounds. I got in, started the engine, and began driving. The gravel track led away from the lodge, winding through dense forest toward the county road 6 miles north. I knew the route. I'd driven it a week ago when I arrived. At 2 miles, I passed a trail marker I recognized. A wooden post marked with a yellow blaze, indicating the boundary of Gerard's property. At 4 miles, I passed the same marker again. I stopped the Jeep, my hands tightening on the wheel. I checked the odometer. I'd driven 4 miles, the math was right, but the landmark was wrong. I continued. At 6 miles, the trail opened onto a clearing, and I saw the lodge ahead exactly as I'd left it, smoke rising from the chimney, the porch light still on. I turned around, drove the opposite direction. At 8 miles, the lodge appeared again, waiting patiently at the end of the track. as if it had simply relocated to wherever I was headed. I tried 3 more times, different routes, different speeds. Once I abandoned the jeep and walked into the forest, navigating by the sun, heading due south. After 2 hours, I found myself standing on the lodge's front porch, breathing hard, my legs aching. The door slightly ajar, as if inviting me back inside. Merrick had warned me, the land has a way of looping back. I sat on the porch steps and stared at the trees. They swayed in the wind, indifferent, eternal. Somewhere in that forest, Ethan was still walking or standing or waiting. Somewhere, my own voice was humming a song I'd taught it. The inheritance wasn't property, it was a binding. I went back inside. The lodge smelled like coffee and wood smoke. The binder was open on the table, turned to a blank page at the end. In the margin, fresh ink, my handwriting, though I hadn't written it. You can go when you stop wanting to. I stared at the words, trying to understand. Then I realized the thing outside, the thing that knocked and wore faces and learned voices, wasn't holding me here. I was, because leaving meant abandoning the responsibility. It meant letting the boundary collapse. It meant letting the thing that had taken Ethan spread beyond these 17 acres, beyond the trees, beyond the rules. Gerard had tried to leave. He'd tried to burn it down. And he'd stayed for 40 years because he understood what I was only now beginning to grasp. The lodge was a prison, but it was also a dam. And I was the only one left to hold it. I sat at the table and opened a drawer. Inside I found blank laminated sheets, a dry erase marker, and a laminating machine. Tools Gerard had used to update the rules as he learned them. I took a sheet and began writing. Rule number 16. If you try to leave in the land loops, do not panic. Return to the lodge, wait 24 hours, the boundary will stabilize. I didn't know if it was true, but it felt true in the way the other rules had felt true. A logic born from observation and survival. I laminated the sheet and placed it in the binder. That night I heard knocking from inside the walls. 3 slow beats, patient and deliberate. I did not knock back. I heard my own voice from upstairs calling my name softly, asking if I was okay. I did not answer. I checked the salt lines. I kept the curtains drawn. I followed the rules. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed, a brief flicker of signal, rare and fleeting. A text from my mother. "How's the lodge? You doing okay up there?" I started typing, "I'm alone out here," then stopped. I remembered Merrick's warning. Never tell anyone you're alone out here. It loves that sentence. I deleted the message, typed a new one. "It's quiet, I'm managing, I'll call you soon." I hit send and watched the message deliver. The signal vanished. I set the phone down and looked around the lodge. The walls were solid, the locks were secure, the generator hummed. But I knew the truth now. The rules didn't end at the lodge. They followed you into language, into thought, into the small decisions that defined who you were. The thing outside didn't need to break down doors. It just needed you to slip. One word, one moment of carelessness, one rule forgotten. And when you did, it would be there, waiting, wearing your face, speaking your voice, living your life while you stood somewhere else, trapped in the spaces between certainty. I turned to a blank page in the binder and wrote a final note, my hands steady now, resigned. If you're reading this, I'm still here. The lodge is yours now. Follow the rules. Do not test them. Do not assume you're smarter than what's out here. You're not. The inheritance isn't land. It's a responsibility. You're not a prisoner. You're a keeper. And you'll stay because someone has to. I signed my name, dated it, placed the pen down. Outside, something knocked 3 times on the wall, patient and slow, like a question that would wait forever for an answer. I did not respond. I poured another cup of coffee, opened Gerard's observational logs, and began reading. Learning, preparing, because I understood now. I would be here a long time. The lodge settled around me, holding its breath, and in the distance, beyond the trees, something that was learning to be me stood watching the windows, counting the seconds I looked, waiting for the moment I'd forget. I closed the curtains. I followed the rules. And I survived. One night at a time.